Okay, stop scrolling, just for a second. I want you to imagine something. Picture a Homo sapiens from 50,000 years ago, not a caveman from a cartoon. Not the grunting, hunched-over creature Hollywood keeps putting in movies. A real one. Same brain as yours, same lungs, same hunger, same capacity for frustration, joy, and really bad decisions. Same exact biological hardware running underneath that animal skin. Now imagine dropping him into a modern grocery store. He's standing in the cereal aisle. There are 47 types of cereal. One of them is literally called Honey Smacks. Another one has a cartoon tiger on the box telling him it's great. He doesn't know what a tiger on a box means. He grabs a cart. He doesn't know what a cart is. He figures it out quickly because he's smart. He's been outsmarting predators his whole life. He starts filling it. He passes the snack aisle. He passes the frozen food section. He passes the bakery, where something incredible is happening, with bread and butter and sugar. He has never in his life experienced anything like this concentration of available food. His brain is going absolutely haywire. Here's the question, though. Not what happens to him emotionally, not how does he react to self-checkout. Though that would be a great video, the real question is this. Could that guy, that ancient elite survival machine, actually become obese? Could he? Because here's what we've been told our whole lives. Ancient humans were lean because they ran a lot. They hunted. They walked miles every day. They were basically prehistoric athletes with stone tools, and we are their disappointing descendants. Sitting on couches, eating Honey Smacks directly out of the box at 11 p.m. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the real reason ancient humans weren't obese has almost nothing to do with how much they moved? What if the biology they passed down to us, the exact same biology running inside your body right now, is actually the reason obesity became possible? And what if, given the right conditions, an ancient human and a modern human would end up in exactly the same place? Let's go. First, we need to set the scene properly, because context matters here. We're talking about anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens. People who, if you cleaned them up, gave them a haircut, and handed them a jacket, could absolutely walk into a coffee shop. These people lived between roughly 300,000 years ago and about 10,000 years ago before the agricultural revolution.
They were hunter-gatherers. Their whole existence revolved around a single, brutal priority.
Find food, eat it, don't die, repeat. Simple in theory, absolutely brutal in practice. Their diet was varied, wildly, chaotically varied, depending on where they lived, what season it was. They might eat mostly large game one week, then tubers and roots, then fruit when it was in season. then fish, then eggs, then insects, which, by the way, are genuinely packed with protein. There was no menu. There was no schedule. There was no concept of Tuesday is pasta night. There was just, what can I find today? And is it worth the energy it costs me to get it?
That last part matters enormously, and we'll come back to it.
Ancient humans did not eat 3 meals a day. They did not have a lunch break. They did not snack.
They ate when food existed, and they did not eat when food didn't exist.
There were no backup options. There was no secondary pantry. There was no delivery app with a 30-minute guarantee. That is not a lifestyle choice. That is just the reality of the world they lived in. Now, most people hear all of this and arrive at the obvious conclusion. Of course ancient humans were thin. Of course they were lean. They were running around all day, burning enormous amounts of energy and barely getting enough calories to function. Makes sense, right? Hold on. Here is where everything you think you know gets quietly dismantled.
Scientists have actually studied the closest living equivalents we have to ancient humans. Surviving hunter-gatherer populations that still live by the old methods. The most extensively studied among them is the Hadza people of northern Tanzania. The Hadza are extraordinary. They still hunt with handmade bows. They still forage. They cover enormous distances on foot every single day. Hadza women dig up tubers in the hard African soil and carry heavy loads over long distances. Hadza men track game across the open savanna for hours.
They do not drive. They do not sit in chairs for 8 hours. They do not have desk jobs. They live the way our ancestors lived, and their level of daily physical activity would destroy the average modern person. So when researchers strapped activity monitors to Hadza adults and actually measured their daily calorie burn with precision equipment, not self-reporting, not estimates, real measurements, everyone expected the obvious result. These people must be burning dramatically more calories than sedentary Westerners. They weren't. From adults in the United States, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Japan, that actually sink in.
A Hadza woman who walks miles across the savanna, digs in the earth, hauls water, and manages her children in the African heat.
Burns roughly the same number of calories per day as an American woman who drives to her office and sits at a computer for 8 hours. Same total calories. How is that remotely possible?
The answer is one of the most humbling things about the human body, and it has a name: metabolic adaptation.
Here's what's happening under the hood. Yes, the Hadza move more, dramatically more.
But the body is not a simple machine that outputs more energy the harder you push it. The body is more like an extremely cautious accountant.
If you start spending more on one line item, physical activity, the accountant quietly finds cuts somewhere else to keep the total budget the same.
The Hadza burn less energy at rest.
Their basal metabolic rate, the energy your body uses just to keep you breathing, and your heart beating, and your cells functioning, is lower than the typical Westerners when you adjust for body size.
The immune system gets slightly dialed back.
Certain cellular maintenance processes run a little leaner. Hormonal activity shifts. The result is that the total daily calorie burn, when you add everything up, ends up nearly identical.
Between a Hadza forager and an office worker in Chicago.
This is not a flaw in human design. This is evolution doing exactly what evolution does.
Keeping you alive and functional in a world where caloric availability is uncertain and energy must be managed with extreme care.
Certain cellular maintenance processes run a little leaner. Hormonal activity shifts. If the most physically active population alive today burns the same calories as the most sedentary populations, from adults in the United States, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Japan, that actually sink in, is lower than the typical Westerners when you adjust for body size. Not because they weren't trying, because the world wouldn't give it to them consistently enough to produce a prolonged caloric surplus. And without a prolonged caloric surplus, the body cannot store enough fat to reach clinical obesity.
Scarcity was doing all the heavy lifting.
Makes sense, right? Hold on. Here is where everything you think you know gets quietly dismantled. Because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating and a little unsettling. The ancient human body was not passively neutral about fat storage. It was aggressively, enthusiastically pro-fat. But the whole system was wired specifically to accumulate as much fat as possible the moment food became available.